We spend a lot of time thinking about our relationships with our boyfriends, our spouses, our mothers, our bosses. But how much time do you spend thinking about your relationship with food? It's obviously a deep and complex relationship. Otherwise, we'd be able to ditch our bad habits just like that. But we're not. So I'm Janis Jibrin, the Best Life Lead Nutritionist. And here with me is another Best Life expert, Adrian Brown. She is one of the leading eating disorder psychiatrists in Washington, D.C. So obviously, she has spent a lot of time thinking about our relationship to food. So I'm going to lead with the positive, Adrian. What is a healthy relationship with food? Tell me what that looks like.
Well, I think our basic need for food makes it a healthy relationship. I mean, it really is one of the first life experiences that we have when we are born. And of course, food is much more than just fuel. It's a social and cultural medium as well. But I think that somebody who has food and perspective in their lives is someone who enjoys food without it becoming the center of their lives. I mean, unless, of course, they do that for a living, which with the rise of celebrity chefs, I guess, is not uncommon.
Right. And so what about how much dysfunction is sort of normal in our relationship to food?
Well, I think if you feel guilty about eating that third chocolate chip cookie, I would not consider that dysfunctional. I would consider dysfunction when it is really getting in the way of health or normal social living. Like, for example, if somebody is so preoccupied with what they're going to eat that they refuse to eat out in restaurants or to eat at someone's home, I would consider that dysfunctional.
Okay, and so when does that sort of borderline dysfunction become really worrisome? What are some of the signs?
So again, with eating disorders, what we see are, besides a preoccupation with food and weight, we also see behaviors like overly restrictive eating or over-exercising, purging behaviors like inducing vomiting or taking laxatives.
Right. And when people abuse food, like what would you say this is? Now the relationship has become abusive. So you said eating disorders, and how about addictive eating, which actually I wrote a blog about pretty recently. I would think that's one of the sort of the ultimate abuses of food, when you become addicted to food.
Sure. Well, addiction is really an interesting topic in and of itself, in that until recently we didn't think that you could be addicted to food because you can live without alcohol or drugs, but you can't live without food. But in fact, there is a segment of the population who is addicted to sugar. But even short of that real addictive behavior, I think the key element is feeling out of control. If people are either eating, binge eating or overeating in a way that feels out of control to them, that would be a sign that they might need some help.
Right, and there's that fine line between being addicted and emotional eating. And so give me some of the signs, if you're this, you're an emotional eater.
So I think people who eat emotionally are people who are not eating because they're hungry or because something appeals to them in terms of their appetite. They're people who are eating because of, in OA, they talk about this anagram HALT, hungry, then angry, lonely, or tired. So they're eating for reasons that are other than biological, social, or cultural reasons.
Right, and OA being Overeaters Anonymous.
I'm sorry, yes, thank you for
which
for
you think
that
is a very useful place to go for people who have some emotional eating.
I think particularly for people who have addictive behaviors, it can be very helpful because the 12-step model has been helpful for those people. But I think people who have emotional eating benefit from emotional support, and that's what those kinds of support groups tend to offer.
Now, I've had clients, and you've had lots of them, that have had emotional eating, and what we always try to do is give them some non-food rewards, some non-food ways of coping, and just curious what has worked for your patients.
Well, I think they can fall in two categories, and one going back to the fellowship of OA, that certainly a lot of times what's lacking is people who have emotional eating fail to make good use of their relationships or don't have those relationships that can help substitute for their relationship with food. And then, I mean, obviously even in the best relationships, that other person isn't available all the time. So finding coping skills like taking a walk, surfing the internet. One of my favorites is going to have a manicure, because you really can't eat while you're having a manicure. But any kind of exercise, I think, is particularly helpful in overcoming those urges.
Yeah, and what I tell people is this might not work right away. food is soothing, it's immediate, you're used to it, and so if it doesn't work, keep going, keep trying these alternate techniques.
That is such a good point, because I will have people who come to me and say, I tried walking and it didn't help. It's like, well, you've been doing this emotional eating for years. It's not in overnight that it's going to change.
Right. This is, I think, my last question for you. So let's say you've had a very unhealthy relationship with food. Maybe you had anorexia, bulimia. When people have had that, how easy is it, or how likely is it that they can go back to feeling normal again about food and enjoying it?
Well, we have good treatments for both of those conditions, and for emotional eating also. So I think that while people who have had emotional eating in the past, particularly under times of stress, may fall back on that kind of behavior, they can certainly convert, if you will, to having a healthy relationship where they enjoy food and enjoy eating with other people.
Right. And I know you love food. You and I have been out to dinner together. So I think you're a great model, because you're a person that loves food, but you don't have this unhealthy obsession.
I try to model good behavior. I try to practice what I preach.
Good. So for more of Dr. Adrian Brown's advice, go to thebestlife.com. I'd suggest going to the articles section and typing in Adrian Brown, and you'll get some fabulous information about emotional eating and about the connection of our emotions to health. I'm Janis Jibrin, Best Life Nutritionist. Thanks for watching.